much, Representative Miranda, and welcome to Lunch with Your Legislators, our regular Friday, 11 a.m. virtual town hall. We have a rock star panel for you today. My name is Brigid Kelly. I represent the 31st House District. I'm here with my colleagues, Representative Jessica Miranda from the 28th, Representative Catherine Ingram from the 32nd, and Representative Sedrick Denson from the Fighting 33rd. And we're really excited to have a panel of school superintendents today to talk a little bit about what's happening now and what we think may happen in the future, and to hear a little bit about what's happening in their school districts. So Rep. Denson is going to introduce our panel. I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping details before my colleagues give a few opening comments. We really appreciate everyone's time and joining. So we're on Zoom. You can also join via Facebook Live. Some people have submitted questions prior to today, so we appreciate that, but you can always feel free to add your questions to the chat or in the comments on Facebook Live, and we'll get to as many of those as possible. The way our program is going to work today is after our opening comments, we'll introduce the panel, and then each panelist will have an opportunity to talk a little bit about their school districts and what's happening. So we have Laura Mitchell, the superintendent of Cincinnati Public, Terri, the superintendent from Finneytown, Mary Ronan, superintendent of Norwood, and Anthony Smith, superintendent of Winwood. So we're going to save a lot of time for questions for them because they are the experts, and we're really, really, really glad to have them here today. So with that, put your questions in the chat or in the comments on Facebook, and I will turn it over to Representative Miranda.
Thank you, Representative Kelly, and thank you all for joining us. This is sure to be an amazing conversation with some of our area school superintendents. As always, we are coming to you live on Facebook, so please submit questions either in the Facebook feed. We have folks monitoring that, or here in the Zoom chat. And I just wanted to cover, since we are on the topic of education, I wanted to cover one bill very quickly that we passed on the Ohio House floor yesterday, which is House Bill 239. House Bill 239 will remove some of the end of course exams, and it's basically a Testing Reduction Act piece of legislation. We're going from 7 exams down to 4, and we also thankfully got an amendment in there yesterday to make holding back of third graders under the third grade guarantee basically not happening for the 2021 school year. So we're happy to have that amendment in there so that those kind of punitive damages don't happen to our babies in school and third graders. So we're happy about that. And I don't want to take up too much time because I know we're going to have a very, very long discussion from our 4 superintendents and a lot of questions and answers to get to. So with that, I will kick it over to my colleague, Representative Kathy Ingram.
Doing this. What
there
am
you
I
go.
doing?
I gotcha.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yep.
Thanks very much, you guys. Glad to be here today. I'm going to comment on House Bill 239. Though we got the amendment in there regarding the third grade guarantee and how that will change. Of course, it will be a continuation of what was in 197. I want to say that on the floor yesterday, very suspiciously, another amendment was added that would make the ACT an opt-in instead of an automatic and an opt-out for our students. And so I'm very troubled by that. And of course, I'm going to push for the Senate to get that particular amendment out of there, because I think it does many of our children that we tried to ensure had an opportunity to take the ACT, that they're not going to opt in. And that becomes the real issue. And so that concerns me. I also want to just simply comment on a call that I was on earlier today, and we're talking about the civil unrest in regard to the young man who died in Minnesota. It's important for us to pay attention to where we are and things that are happening around us, especially in regard to our children who need to all the opportunity that they can possibly get. So it's troubling for me, but we'll be doing something from the State House, I believe, in regard to the disparity as to how we are being treated during this particular time. So thanks for being here today, you guys. I'm sure everybody has a lot of questions.
All right, next we'll go to Rep. Denson for a few opening comments. I think he might be having a few technical difficulties, so maybe we'll just give Rep. Denson a little extra time at the end for him to close us out. So with that, we'll go right to our panel, and y'all have some time to present, so we'll let you introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your backgrounds. And I'm just going to go through the order in which we will go, so that after the person prior to you finishes, you can just go right ahead with your remarks. So we'll start with Superintendent Laura Mitchell from Cincinnati Public, then to Superintendent Terri from Finneytown, on to Superintendent Mary Ronan from Norwood, and finish up with Superintendent Anthony Smith from Winton, and then we'll have time for questions. So Superintendent Mitchell, if you'd like to go right ahead, we're going to be sharing the slides that you provided to us. So if you just want to cue us up when you're ready, we will go right ahead. So Superintendent Laura Mitchell, Cincinnati Public.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation today. So I am completing my 3rd year as superintendent. It is like flown by very fast, and never in a million years did I think that during my time as superintendency, or during my lifetime period, that we would be in the middle of a pandemic. And so obviously it's had a major impact on our district. Prior to becoming the superintendent, I served as the deputy superintendent under Mary Ronan, so for a lot of years before stepping into the role of superintendent. So I'll go ahead and get started into the slides. Thank you. All right, so on slide 2. There we go, great, thank you. So Cincinnati Public Schools is the 3rd largest district in the state of Ohio. We have over 37,000 students preschool through grade 12. We have 65 buildings spanning 91 square miles, and we are the fastest growing urban district in the state. Our enrollment is up 20% since 2012-2013. As a matter of fact, 3 years ago, we opened 3 new schools. This school year, we opened 2 new schools, and next year we will be opening an additional 2 more new schools. This school year, we also launched a new strategic plan, and it has 5 major goal areas. And so we spent an entire year with our board, as well as a large group of constituents, developing the strategic plan. And it is centered in 5 major goal areas: student-centered decision-making, which is really all about academic achievement; health and safety, which is about health and safety and security of our kids, and obviously now is a major focus of our work; community engagement; optimized capabilities, really gets to the operations and the efficiencies that we're gaining through our work with Children's Hospital; and then growth. Our board would like us to continue growing, and over the course of our strategic plan, the plan is to be able to open 3 new schools within that time frame. So this year we counted, we only counted one of the 2 because Clifton School we reopened, but that was already in our plans, but we had not planned to open a new Montessori school on the west side of town. So we will have 4 new schools though by the time the strategic plan is finished. Next slide, please. Right now, our market share is about 65%. So we have about 65% of the kids who live in the Cincinnati area attending our district. As I think about COVID-19, in terms of we led a major social media campaign to really get the news and information out to our families and our community about COVID in terms of our remote learning plan. So we put a remote learning plan in place very quickly to be able to address the educational concerns of our kids. So recognizing that all of our kids didn't have devices or Wi-Fi, we also produced packets for each kid, every grade level, and each content area. And we were really fortunate to have GE Aviation come through, and they paid FedEx to copy all of those materials. And then we put them at our food banks for families to go and pick them up as we're picking up food. In addition, Staples came through and they offered to copy them for any family who came into a Staples location. And so we sent them the file, and any family who went in would then just tell them the grade level, and they would give them all their subject areas. That was in addition to the online learning that took place. And so when I talk about online learning, although we have an initiative 4th through 12th grade, devices for every kid, all of the devices were in our buildings and they weren't a part of a take-home program. And so we then deployed close to 6,000 devices to our kids. First, starting with 12th grade, those kids who needed devices to be able to do their work in order to graduate. And then we started scaling it backwards in terms of kids who needed credit recovery options to make sure that our kids were actually receiving the credits that they needed for graduation, regardless of what grade they're in, moving towards graduation. We have 24 school-based health centers in our district, and quite a few of those health centers have stayed open during this pandemic and will continue to stay open. And we offered 23 food hubs and have given out over 240,000 meals to date. So we have our hubs that are open, and they will continue to be open all summer. And they are open Monday, Wednesday, Friday for breakfast and lunch. So when kids come to those hubs, they pick up 2 lunches and 2 breakfasts to be able to span Tuesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, they just receive 2 meals, breakfast and lunch. So a major campaign around social media to get our information out. We also have a microsite for our remote learning that gives all of our lessons, in addition to our lessons being there remotely as well as the packets. We then partnered with Cincinnati Bell and Spectrum to offer CPS TV, in which our teachers were able to go on and provide demonstration lessons for our young people. In addition to all of that, our teachers also engaged our kids through Google Meet. And so they would have their lessons. So kids were scheduled into classes, and then they would log in and then be able to be there with their friends and also with their teachers. Next slide, please. So in the first, I would say 4 weeks, we were really in crisis mode, making sure that our kids were safe and making sure they had food, and then also making sure that they had their packets of work or their digital work. And then we very quickly made a pivot to recover. So we didn't want to stay in the crisis thinking for a very long period of time. And so we set up a recovery team, and it's a pretty large team made up of school-based people as well as central office. And their function was to really identify what will it take for us to be able to say, okay, we're ready to go to open our buildings, whether we're talking about the Ed Center, Iowa Street, or any of our schools. And so with that team, we put together a 10-point criteria that must be in place in order for us to say, yes, we can open a building. And so last week, we opened the Ed Center to employees who could not work from home. And a part of that 10-point criteria is there's a wellness check that you have to do every time you enter the Ed Center, and it's only 4 questions. And it's questions around, do you have a fever? What is your current temperature? Have you been in contact with anyone who has COVID-19? And do you have any symptoms? For those people who do not complete the survey online, when you enter the Ed Center, we have reconfigured it in terms of we have plexiglass up for our security. So when you first come into contact with the security, it's through plexiglass. You have to be able to register that you either taken the health assessment or you do it right there. And then if you don't have a thermometer at home, we have a thermometer there that we will take your temperature and we will put a mask on you. So anyone who comes into any of our facilities must have a temperature check and also must be wearing a mask. So that was phase 1, to open the Ed Center to employees. Phase 2 is to open the Ed Center to the public. So after we have all those things in place, this week we open it to our public by appointment only. So parents who need to come in to register kids, it's by appointment. Again, we have plexiglass for our customer care center. And if we have an overflow of people, then we're asking people to wait into their car, and then we'll call you or text you when it's time to come in. And so that has gone relatively smoothly as well. Phase 2 is to reopen our school offices, and so that will take place on Monday, and that will only be for our clerical staff and our principals who need to do work to get ready for the upcoming school year. And then June 15th, we will reopen our offices to visitors, and it will be the same protocols we have at the Ed Center. Temperature check, health assessment, mask, and we will be open only 3 days a week for a limited amount of time from 8 until 12 o'clock each day, so that our families have the opportunity to be able to register and to check on any materials that they may need in our school offices. Phase 3 is to reopen our schools however that might look for next school year. So I'm going to apologize up front. I have a 9-year-old. She's in the background. She's making a little bit of noise. So my sincere apologies. I'm trying to get her under control. And just a shout out to all of the parents who are at home trying to homeschool and get their work done at the same time. I can be a testament to say it is very challenging and very hard. And so I look forward to her going back to school soon. So that's our recovery plan. And we'll have all of those same points also in place for our schools should we actually reopen in the fall. And then we also now have a future schools team in place as well. So next slide.
Actually, Superintendent Mitchell, I apologize for doing this to you, but we know you have a couple extra slides, but we really want to make sure that we have enough time to get folks to answer their questions. So I think we might have Superintendent No from Finneytown go ahead. And then if we have some time during the question and answers, then maybe we can double back to your last couple slides.
Okay, thank you, representatives. I'm Terri No. I'm finishing my 4th year as a superintendent at Finneytown. I have over 30 years of experience in education, and we passed a bond levy in Finneytown this last November, so we're right smack in the middle of me leading and building a new elementary school. Unlike CPS, we are quite small. We are a bedroom community of 4 square miles with just under 1,400 students. So whatever I do, Laura has to do 100 times. So I appreciate the work that she's having to do right now. We, as Laura mentioned, went into remote learning mode on the spur of the moment, and really just kind of were in crisis mode as well. We had a 1-to-1 already with our 6 to 12, but most kids left on Thursday, and we then closed on Friday and Monday for teacher in service. So kids left, and many of them didn't take their devices with them. So we still had to make arrangements for that. And then we had packets to start with for our K to 3, and offered computers for the 4 to 5. But then after we knew we were going to be closed longer, realized we needed devices out for those younger ones too, and have offered everyone, but not everybody has taken us up on that. We also had to come up with some hotspots and help our families get connected with Spectrum and Cincinnati Bell and that to get the free Wi-Fi they were offering so that they could get internet. We plan to continue drive-through pickup meals all summer long, because more than anything, our kids are going to need that this summer. We do it once a week. They get 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches. We're making sure that we're handing out fresh fruits and vegetables because we don't know if they're going to have any other options for that. So, you know, they're getting apples and oranges and bananas and different things like that. And they're also getting fresh and frozen vegetables, like they get a little baggie of corn and things like that. So, you know, and then our food service has put out on our website, you know, different menus, different ideas to make things with what they've been given. So we're trying to help those families as much as we can. And our first mode of attack when we went into this was Maslow over Bloom. We wanted to make sure we took care of our kids and our families and our staff, touched base with everyone. We've got spreadsheets with everybody, you know, writing down that they've had contact, and we've had to hunt down some kids with social media and asking other students to see if they can track them down because kids just disappeared. But we have been able to get in touch with all of them, thank goodness, and connect. And I won't say that the learning was stellar to begin with because we were just trying to, build the boat as we went out of the dock, but we got better as we went along, and we are doing a lot of professional development now, and we'll do that over the summer and in the fall because we don't know yet what the fall is going to bring. And we're calling this our COVID-19 remote learning right now. Whatever we do in the fall will be blended learning, and it will be much more effective and much more learning driven, and still trying to watch out for all of our kids and make sure that we're touching base for our fragile students, our students dealing with trauma. This has been just added stress to them, and parents are feeling it. Parents, like you mentioned, Laura, are trying to work from home, help their kids with their school, and try to stay sane all at the same time. So that's been a big part of our concern as we look at the logistics, the obstacles coming back in the fall, and we'll talk about that more later. But every time we think we've got a little bit of a plan, then things change. So we haven't got a definitive plan yet, but we do have our basic outline, like Laura said, making sure that the health and safety guidelines, and we did the same thing. The CDC said for businesses and schools, in order to open, you have to do A through Z. Well, we're doing the same thing. Unless we can do A through Z, and right now we're trying to get supplies, hand sanitizer, masks, all of those things. If we can't do that, then we can't open. So we've got to make sure we do that all summer and get that ready. Yeah, we're going to make it happen. We're going to make our delivery better, but we want to make sure that we're providing a quality education. We also know that there are students that are not going to want to come back, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later about things that we as superintendents and districts are going to need in order to be able to meet the needs of all of our children. The legislation for blended learning is pretty specific, and we're going to need to be able to offer some fully online kinds of things for kids that have underlying illnesses, or their parents do, or whatever, and that parents aren't willing to send them back out of fear. So I'll end with that, and thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, Superintendent. And up next, we're going to go to Superintendent Mary Ronan from Norwood Schools.
Mary, you're muted.
Okay, maybe we'll send it to Superintendent Smith so we can see if we can get Superintendent Ronan.
I'm back on. Somehow I just zipped off. Good morning, everyone. Mary Ronan, Superintendent at Norwood. I've been here a little less than a year, came in as a result of the death of the previous superintendent. Great little district, 1,900 students, and everyone, we're walkable, no transportation, which is fabulous. Probably something we're looking at. We do have a renewal levy on the ballot in November, so any advice you have about doing a campaign in this kind of climate with the strange things happening to elections would be greatly appreciated. Laura, thank you for that fabulous comprehensive program. We're all struggling with the same thing, and I believe most of us really want to talk about how do we reopen while taking care of the health, safety, and well-being of the students, the families, the community, and make sure all our students have access. And I think we all know we're struggling with the quality of instruction because we were just kind of dumped into this. And how can we improve that for next year? Thanks to all of our representatives about the reduction in testing, because I think we all know we're going to see a drop in test scores. Oh my goodness. I don't think any of us can pretend that we've had the same quality of instruction the last 3 months of the school year. And I think that's what we're so worried about for next year. How can we keep quality up when there's just real struggles in the household? Plus, I think we're all nervous because we've been told to develop local plans. So you could have 600 plus plans in the state. And, you know, especially since, you know, we're surrounded by Cincinnati Public. I know if I do anything weird that's different than Cincinnati, you're going to have all kinds of questions. I have to say the Hamilton County Service Center has been helpful because they have been getting us on conference calls, trying to keep us all together, because I think we're all just so sensitive to that. Parents talk, and I think we do need to have a coordinated plan. So that's what's nice, to get to talk and hear what all the other superintendents are doing. So thank you.
Okay, next up, we are going to hear from Superintendent Anthony Smith from Winwood.
Hey, good afternoon. First of all, thank you for letting me be part of this experience. I had the pleasure of being one of Mary assistant superintendents in Cincinnati Public for a number of years. I worked with Laura, and Terri and Noah and I have worked on several great projects together. This is my 7th year. Proud to be here. One of the things that a few of the things I'd like to mention, we've had the pleasure of understanding some of these issues around COVID-19. We were not prepared like many districts were, but we were actually prepared with technology. So since we're a project-based learning district, we had already issued Chromebooks to students in grades 7 through 12, well before the pandemic at the beginning of the year. We came back, we started having conversations about the work packets, and we realized the work packets didn't really work for us because teachers were apprehensive. You know, when you turn the work packets in, who handles them? How long does COVID last on paper? And a whole lot of analysis about, you know, just how to really grade some of the content. So we actually went back out and we issued Chromebooks to students in grades 2 through 12. We are very excited about the lessons and how students were able to adapt to the work. We have been in a partnership with Sprint for over 4 years, and Sprint was our provider in the beginning. So as far as hotspots are concerned, we had the hotspots, and we were actually excited about that. Laura mentioned something about the plexiglass. Every office now has a plexiglass set up for visitors, for conversations. The enrollment center, the main center, where our families come to have conversations as it relates to districts, grades, subjects, content. There's also a great piece of information where we issued out over 3,100 Chromebooks, and to date, students are still working. Some of them are still finishing up some of their work and some of the schedules and activities that they needed in order to move the district forward. We are very, very concerned, though, about the summer session. I know some districts are saying they're not going to have a summer session. We're trying to figure it out. And because we know, like every other district, there are some young people that are going to fall behind. And we don't want that to happen. We have to figure out how to keep them in the loop and make sure that they're engaged academically for many, many years to come. We have over 3,200 languages, 32 languages, 3,200. That would be a mind-blowing experience. We have 32 languages spoken in our district. So getting the communication to each family in a way where it adds fidelity and integrity is very, very difficult, but we're managing to do that. We're about 12.5 square miles in the area of, when we serve 3 major communities, Forest Park, Green Hills, and Springfield Township, which is about 4,000 students. You'll see this amazing bus go by. If you've ever seen it, it's the Nutrition is the Mission bus. We've decided that a lot of districts will have the opportunity where students can come to the school to get a free meal during the summer. We realize that some students can't make it to that location. So we decided to take a bus that was out of commission, worked with some great people. They wrapped the bus, put Wi-Fi in it, all kinds of technology and supports. And that bus has been a lifesaver for us over the summer. because last year alone, we served 24,000 meals just with the nutritionist, the mission bus. The bus will be rolling again with Wi-Fi and supports for students. So again, we're very excited. Terri, my colleague down the street, mentioned something in her presentation about Maslow over Bloom's and the hierarchy of needs. Well, we are educators by trade, but we have become a whole lot of other different things. We've become food servant operators. We've become transportation directors. And there are a host of other things that we've had to take on, which are really not our original tasks. But in order to make sure that our students are being taken care of appropriately, we've launched some other initiatives to make things happen. We are actually going to have our first ever in the history of Winwood City Schools, a remote graduation that will be aired on Channel 64 at 4 o'clock on Saturday. So if you are so inclined, please tune in. It will be an enjoyable experience. And I am going to stop there so that the panel can go on with other questions and comments and suggestions.
Thank you so much, Superintendent, and thanks to all of our guests for all of the hard work you're doing. I know it's difficult times, and it's just good to know that we got some folks working hard to make sure our families and children are taken care of. We are now going to kick it over to Representative Ingram and Miranda, who is going to take it from here for our question and answer portion. That'll take us to the close of our lunch today. So, Rep. Ingram.
I am just actually going to throw it to Rep. Miranda because I know she's got a question there. And I also see that there's quite a few questions that people have sent in. So Rep. Miranda, if you go ahead with that, then we'll be good.
Thanks, Rep. Ingram. So I'm going to start off with one of the questions that we actually had submitted from our registrants. And, you know, we talk a lot about the academics and what we're doing for kids in terms of their learning, and we know this has been a challenge for virtual learning. But I wanted to kind of start us off with this question regarding the socio-emotional well-being of our students, staff, and parents. Superintendents, can you speak to what you have been doing in that realm, how this has, you know, presented its own plethora of challenges, but what you're doing within your own districts to make the socio-emotional learning of our students, and then of course all of your staff, something positive here in our communities?
So I'll start off. We have our social workers. We had already increased our school social workers for this year, and we have them contacting our families. So we kind of have like a hot list of kids by school that we're making sure that we reach out to make sure their needs are being met. We also have mental health providers 5 days a week in all of our schools. And so they've been reaching out to them as well. And we'll continue that work over the summer, in addition to our counselors reaching out. And so I think it was Terri who said, we have spreadsheets that show the number of contacts made with each kid. And so that's what we're doing in terms of handling social and emotional learning. Our Department of Positive School Culture has also developed a series of videos which are online for our families and kids to be able to access and to use. And those videos are actually developed by employees of CPS that really talk about what families can do and what kids can do during this really challenging time. So that's what we have. A lot of resources on we have a micro remote learning site, cps-k12.org. So if you go there, we have videos there and materials for families and for kids, but we're reaching out to those kids who are on our hot list.
I'll go. We have just launched our new survey to all teachers, and we're going to do one for parents as well as for students. But one of our major responsibilities for the executive team, they have to take 2 hours out of their day each day to call parents, check on children, and just kind of figure out and touch base and see how things are going on. We have that same opportunity for parents and for teachers as well, because we'd like to know, how do you feel about the issues surrounding the pandemic? And what I mentioned to the executive team, we were launching this initiative several weeks ago. Don't rush the people on the line. Give them a chance to have a conversation, it's not really like a checklist, how are you doing, but how can we support you and how can we help? As I mentioned before, and like other districts, we have 32 languages spoken. So the challenge at times is our students are being the interpreters to the parents, and we just hope that they are saying what we've actually asked them, the questions that we've asked. Our children have been very, very diligent, very, very supportive, and we're going to continue with the surveys because we understand that even when we talked about the parade graduations, the remote graduations, the non-traditional graduations, I know that parents were very, very upset and concerned about how it was going to go, but I can tell you the teachers were actually see some of the kids that they had known for years, go through that experience, go through that line, the handshake, the hugs, the accolades, and those things didn't happen. So we're trying to figure out the wellness part of it. And Representative Miranda and also Kathy, I appreciate you guys for even asking about that part of it, because as we mentioned before, yeah, we are educators, but the social well-being of the kid, if that's distorted in any way, then the educational component actually becomes a second-tier opportunity.
And I agree with both of the superintendents who have already spoken. Our counselors, our social workers, our mental health providers are all touching base, but we also have teachers touching base every week. We have administrators. I've reached out to, different families, just as Laura talked about the hot spots, knowing that we have children that are fragile or have needs that are, mental needs that are higher than others. They just need that connection. And we've tried very hard to make sure that we've done that. We've also set up a web page with resources, and those resources aren't just educational. It's free food stores. It's, we put the link there to be able to apply for unemployment. All of their needs in the family, we put our translation services on there, because every family has different needs, but they all have needs right now. So I send out that information, reiterating some things, adding new things. And then we are also doing surveys. Anthony, if you have yours for the staff, I'd love to see that, because I have mine ready, but I'd be happy to see yours. I really respect what you do in your district as well. And again, more than anything, especially with our staff, it is that personal touch, that, me reaching out to say, I do care about you and want to know what you're going through, and, what the pitfalls are. They hesitate at times to say, yes, I'm afraid to come back next year, because they don't want to think they're going to be out of a job. But we have to get real. We have to think about what next year is going to look like. So we have to get as much information as we can. So we just have to really, the governor keeps saying we're all in this together, and we really have to do that.
Terri, I like what you said about the personal touch. That's what I'm worried about when the staff and students come back. I mean, it has to be traumatizing for young children to come back, maybe a nurse there in full protective gear, taking their temperature, kids in masks, children wanting to hug teachers, teachers wanting to hug back. I think we are really, it's isolating, it's frightening, and I just think there's going to be mistakes made, because it's human nature to want to reach out and touch. Yes. And I think we're all going to struggle with that. And I think having to push children back and say, no, you can't do that. No, you can't touch people. No, you have to wear a mask. I think that scars, especially young children. So that is what is just really creepy for the long term with this. It is so isolating, especially for the youngest of our students.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I don't know if hiring my 2 social workers will make a difference, because it's every day, every minute when you've got to, say, I can't do that. I can't touch that person. I can't be close. That's what's really scary to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mary, you mentioned something very important. The one thing that we have to understand about the social workers and the counselors that we're putting in place to help deal with some of the stress and anxiety, they are human too. So the social workers and the counselors need support along the way. And I don't want people to ever forget that even though they are social workers and counselors by trade and profession, they are human beings and they will also need some TLC.
Really good point.
Thank you, Superintendent.
I know that there's,
Go ahead, Rep.
go
Ingram.
ahead. No, I want to make sure we get to some of these other questions because there's quite a few that are here. And, you know, I'm taking notes if you see me looking down, because I think there's some things we have to do from the State House to make sure that, as Mary alluded to, that there is some kind of consistency across the state as to how we're rolling this thing out and what it's going to look like in the fall. So I want to get to some of those questions. I saw a few that were pretty interesting. So Rep. Miranda, if you just take care of that, I'll be sitting
Absolutely.
here.
So we have a number of questions coming through regarding social distancing within our schools. How will that work with visitor management, temperature screenings, reporting illnesses and symptoms if and when we do open the school year in the fall? So superintendents, you can address those, and I know some of you've already spoken to those kind of facts in your presentations, but I do want to quickly just address this question because I think this is important. And this question is surrounding the state budget, which we all love and talk about frequently. And it's asking, with the state budget cuts and the receipts of the Federal CARES Act money, how will this impact your budget for the 2020-2021 school year, and how can citizens in turn advocate for our school districts? So if you can kind of touch on both of those, I would appreciate it. Thanks, superintendents.
You know, it's kind of funny that we're being asked to social distance, which means that we can't have as many kids in a room, so we're going to have more adult things, and at the same time cut budgets. You know, you think about our custodial crew. We're going to have to bring in extra people to do more cleaning and things like that. If we can only get somewhere between 9 and 15 kids on a bus, transportation is going to be really, really expanded. So, you know, we just have to figure it out as we go here. But cutting money is not even, we're going to have to, but it's not a priority right at looking at the CARES money isn't even going to be a drop in the bucket to what we've got to do. You know, the one thing from the CDC said they would suggest 5 times a day that kids sanitize their hands with hand sanitizer, and for a regular class of say 25 students, 5 times a day for a week, that would be a gallon of hand sanitizer. So, you know, we're looking at thousands of gallons of hand sanitizer we would need for a school year, and you can't even get it right now. So, you know, and what you can get is crazy prices. So, and as far as social distancing, you know, we're looking at spreading desks out. We're looking at not using the cafeteria. We're looking at all kinds of things so that we can do that social distancing.
So in terms of thinking about the impact on our budget, so the cut that we experienced this year equated to $8 million for us, which quite honestly was quite a bit of money. The CARES Act dollars, so 23 million are coming to Cincinnati, but we won't get 23 million. We'll get 18 million because we have to also make sure that there's money allotted to our non-publics. And so 18 million may sound like a lot of money, but to Terry's point, there are a lot of additional things that we will now have to pay for. We've ordered hundreds of thousands of masks, cleaning supplies. If you talk about transportation alone, not only doubling the number of buses, but we're talking about masking kids and taking their temperatures at school, but we train 1,000 kids every single day, 1,500 routes. That means that the temperature check and the mask have to take place before they get on a bus. So now there's a conversation. Do we have to have monitors who ride the bus, who do a temperature check and put a mask on a kid? Because I can't put them on a bus in a closed-in area with a fever and then send them to school. So there are a lot of additional costs that we're going to have to incur. And if you think about social distancing, in order to break the kids down into smaller groups, that now means I need more staff people. So this 18 million will go extremely fast. In terms of keeping social distancing and how that will actually work, we are working with Children's Hospital on a weekly basis, their infection control department, early detection, prevention, so that they can help us identify what are the specific things that we're going to do every single day to distance the kid, to keep them isolated. If they do have a fever, how we detect it very quickly. And to Terry's point about hand sanitizer, I was talking with one doctor and he said, well, once the kids are in the classroom, teachers will rotate. Don't move the kids, but let the teacher rotate. And every time a child leaves the room for the bathroom or whatever, and they come back in, now they've got to re-sanitize. So we'll go through hand sanitizer and soap very quickly. So it's challenging to try to even think about all of this, which is the reason we're working with children to help us think about it. But we will have major budget implications for things that we haven't even thought of yet.
And I'd say,
Lord.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Ann.
Mary.
Oh, okay.
No.
I was just going to say the big difference between the CARES money and during the recession when we got the jobs money, we had flexibility to use the jobs money to prevent layoffs of staff. You cannot use CARES money for that. So I can buy tons of hand sanitizer, but we've already done a reduction in force. So that's the difference than 7 or 8 years ago during the recession. We were able to keep staff on because we had that flexibility. And the CARES Act is mostly for protective gear and can't use it for operating monies to keep your staff that you desperately need.
And I'm going to transition into the piece. Having all those years to work for Mary, it's always interesting how I can pick up the rest of her thoughts. So thank you for the brainwaves, Mary. But one of the things that we're concerned about the FTE, our employees. So imagine a classroom where there is a presence of COVID. What do you do to that room? And when you start talking about sub-services where people are saying, I can't report, I mean, at a minute's notice, that classroom has to be covered. That's a monetary issue that we're going to have to figure out how to budget and how to cover. In the beginning, the CDC and the governor decided that we're going to close schools. Well, schools are going to actually make the decisions to close themselves based on the population and based on who has the issues around COVID. So we're not going to actually wait to hear from people. I don't know if you heard the latest earlier in the year where 3 Rivers had to close down because there was some issue about flu. The buildings, the schools, the districts are going to actually make some decisions about how they can operate based on the employees that they have providing services to young people. Parents are going to make some decisions about who comes to the school, because once that room has any issues or traces of COVID, then what do you do with it and how long does it stay in its period of incubation? We don't know. So these things are already going to be monetary issues, and everything that comes out is going to be a monetary flash in our existence. And then the final one is they've opened up the sports arena for young people to participate, but they didn't send any protective equipment to go along with it. So that's going to be another budget issue. And Laura mentioned $8 million. Of course, my district couldn't suffer an $8 million hit, but ours is $551,000, and we're expecting another $1 million the next term. So we don't know where the money comes from, but we do understand that we have to keep the lights on and keep kids engaged in education. So there are budget issues all around the state that we're going to have to deal with.
Thank you for that, Superintendents. Rep. Ingram, would you like to close it out here with our last question? I know it's very, very hard to talk anything education in 1 hour, but we've got a lot of good talking points in, and we're going to try to close out here so we can be respectful of everyone's time.
Well, I don't have that last question that you have. I just want to make a comment, though, is that these are things that we try to work on at the State House, and ODE has come up with some sort of a plan, and there's some flexibility in certain things, but this is what we have to say back to the federal government also. we have got to have some surety that we're going to be held harmless for some of this stuff, because as each of the superintendents has alluded to, this is much more costly, and it's going to be much more devastating than folks realize. It won't be like just going back to school. If we have to double route, how much, if you don't own your own fleet, how do you do that? What kind of additional money are you going to have to pay to those transportation providers? And so those are all things that we'll be thinking about. So you can give the last one and then we can go from there, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Thanks, Rep. Ingram. So this last one that we have here, submitted from the registrants, kind of encompasses everything we've already talked about. So I'll go ahead and read this, and then superintendents, if you want to add any last thoughts on what this looks like in your respective districts, please feel free to do so. And this question is, how will blended learning schedules affect school staff and daily exposure to the virus? Will schools be able to address the digital divide? Computer and internet access, as we know, for all students and families is very, very difficult. So how are your districts meeting that, and the challenges you've seen within those two realms so far?
State Rep Miranda, you know already that we had the pleasure when you were on the school board to pass the bond where we have 2 new campuses opening. So these schools will be actually state of the art. And because they'll have the latest HVAC systems and air conditioning and all the amenities, we are really contemplating having a year-round opportunity for our students, because we have to figure out how to make up the deficit. Every superintendent is concerned about the same issue, how to make up the time that was lost. When people say that they were prepared for the pandemic, I'm looking for books and novels and journals. No one was prepared, because this hit us like a ton of bricks. Make this thing work, because our kids are not allowed to be the victims of a circumstance.
That was well said, Anthony.
Thank
That
you.
was very well said. Kind of on a different tact here, though, something that we've talked about in our superintendent meetings is legislation that will provide some immunity to the districts, because this is uncharted territory, and we're going to be charging ahead, doing the best we can for our students. And what happens when somebody starts suing schools because their child contracted COVID at school, or sues because we're not providing the transportation the same way we always have, or whatever it is. And that's going to be like, once courts open up, it's going to be lawsuit central. And districts have got to have some immunity from that, so that we can make some tough decisions and even make mistakes and then recover from it and go forward.
Superintendent, there actually was a bill on the floor yesterday in regard to that kind of lawsuits. And I'm not going to say frivolous, but I am going to say that that is on the floor, passed off the floor yesterday. And I think that we just want to make sure that there is not a way for somebody to come back and say, my child got it at school, I got it from him, et cetera, et cetera. We're suing the district. So we're trying to avoid as much of that as possible, without taking away the rights of persons to be able to look at the ability to have a civil tort settlement. So we're looking at all of those things right now. So I think you bring up a good case or a good point, but I think that actually it's being addressed. It was addressed on the business side, but in my mind, I would count that at the same way as a school, as a restaurant, or as anywhere else. If somebody can say, I got it at school. The difficulty would be in proving it, and you would have to be reckless and deliberately allowing activities to happen that would cause a child to get the disease. So there'll have to be an issue of compliance and what that looks like.
Thank you, Representative Ingram.
I would say that in terms of blended learning, I believe, could be wrong because I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think that we're going back to March 13th ever. in terms of where we were before we closed. And I think that those organizations and businesses that plan on returning to business as usual will find themselves out of business very quickly because things have changed so dramatically. And as a matter of fact, this is a prime opportunity to use this disruption to really change many of the systems that we had in place that weren't working. You know, I think that blended learning is going to be a major part of our work moving forward. But at the same time, we have to be careful with blended learning in terms of the amount of screen time that our kids are experiencing. And so,
Right.
I mean, there are just a lot of things to work out in the best interest. We're not planning to go back to the way we were before all of this took place.
I will say that I have, I take this, and I've said this over and over again, I said it to higher ed folks, is that what we have to do is take this as an opportunity to do things differently and possibly better. So if there's any silver lining behind these clouds that we're under right now, that would be it. And here again, the flexibility to be able to do some things. What does seat time look like for regular brick and mortar public schools? And so that seat time might need to be changed, because as of now, if we go back to the way we were, then you're not allowed to have X number of hours of distance learning and still be able to take attendance. So that'll be an interesting kind of thing as to how we deal with that, how you guys deal with that, how we deal with that, because much of that has been legislated. So we'll have to look at it.
State Rep Ingram, I'd like to add one other point. I think that we have to be very careful, because this is not the time to identify, even though we'll have several months of school that we did not have in session, but this is not the time for educators to rush to the table and start identifying kids with disabilities and creating the student with disability list, because what we'll find is there'll be some kids with gaps in their learning. Our job is to fill the gap, not to identify them to make that student with disabilities list longer than it really is. So I just want to caution us that you don't want to put kids in controversial situations where they can't manage to graduate on time or graduate with the level of integrity where they can be or do or pursue the career of their choice. So I'm cautious that I don't want people to rush out and start making the students with disabilities list longer because the gaps we haven't filled appropriately.
Also, Representative Ingram, Kathy, thank you for recognizing that the state and Ohio Revised Code, there's hundreds of laws that impact schools, and many of those laws we can no longer fulfill. The attendance, there's just a myriad of issues that we're all skirting about right now, but we do appreciate you recognizing the fact that many of these things must change in this new reality.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you all so very much. And I'm going to say my apologies in the beginning of not being able to be on, but obviously you can see there's a lot to talk about with this subject and we could go on forever, but at least us as legislators are able to extract some of this and get to work to do some things that can make life better for all of us going forward. And hopefully our participants today learned a lot and we can continue to be engaged. I do want to give a quick update. I know my colleagues got to do that in the beginning. I'm actually in the car because I was leaving a constituent meeting and it's kind of got pushed to the top of the list because of what's going on now. And so there may be some things coming out of that eventually may have some resources for schools. So that's just another piece of how you can see all these things going on. It affects so many other parts of everyone's lives. So that's what we're working on now. That's why I was late. I wasn't able to make it back home. I had to pull over to a park to be able to get on, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Next week, we are doing our town hall with Equality Ohio. So we encourage you to join in at 11 a.m. Again, a special thanks to all of our panelists today, and those questions that didn't get answered, continue to email those to us and we'll get them to the appropriate place and get you an answer soon. Thanks so much. You all have a great weekend and we'll see you next week.